I know you think you have. You reimagining that moment after you turn off the ignition in your garage? Or maybe the pause in a conversation when things get awkward. But that is not silence. That is just the absence of foreground noise. Beneath it, there is always the hum of the refrigerator, the distant rolling friction of tires on asphalt 3 streets away, the high-frequency whine of the capacitor in your phone charger. I am a sound designer by trade. My life is measured in decibels and frequencies. I spend 12 hours a day wearing Sony MDR 7506 headphones, listening to the world through a microscope. I know that the world never stops screaming. Even air has a sound, a low-end rumble caused by barometric pressure shifting against the diaphragm of a microphone. So when I tell you about the silence I found in the Cascades, I need you to understand that I am speaking about a physical anomaly. A void. It's been 3 years. I still see a not walk into an REI or a Cabela's. That's the smell. That specific, chemically sharp scent of polyurethane coating on ripstop nylon. The smell of a new tent. It triggers a physiological response in me that I see not control. My throat closes up, my palms start sweating cold, oily slickness, and I can hear the blood rushing through my carotid artery like a whitewater rapid. Because that smell is the smell of the thing that was waiting for us. And the worst part? I am the one who drove us there. I am the one who planned the route. I am the one who checked the weather and the topographic maps and the forums. I am the rational one, the fixer. I am the reason Marcus is the way he is now. It was October 14th, 2022, a Friday. The plan was simple, clinical, even. My brother, Marcus, had just finalized a divorce that had dragged on for 18 months. A legal meat grinder that had stripped him of his house, his dog, and about 30 pounds of body weight. He looked like a ghost haunting his own clothes. I proposed the trip as a reset, a brotherhood thing. We drive out to the Olympic Peninsula, hike 6 miles into the Hoh rainforest, camp for 2 nights, and drink expensive whiskey by a fire. I picked him up at 5 a.m. in my 4Runner. It was pitch black, that heavy, wet darkness you only get in the Pacific Northwest. When Marcus threw his bag into the trunk, I noticed he was shaking. Not shivering, shaking. Tremors in his hands. Coffee? I asked, holding out a Yeti tumbler. I had brewed a dark roast, a single-origin Ethiopian blend I ordered from a roaster in Portland. I remember being proud of that coffee. I remember thinking that the specificity of the bean, the temperature of the water, 200 degrees exactly, was a way to control the chaos of his life. If I could make the perfect cup of coffee, maybe I could fix his divorce. That's how the rational mind works, is not it? We bargain with chaos using small, controlled rituals. Thanks, Elias, he said. His voice was thin, scratchy, like a needle on a dirty vinyl record. He climbed in, and the door thudded shut with that reassuring, heavy thunk that Toyota engineers spend millions perfecting. We pulled out onto I-5 South, heading away from Seattle, away from the cell towers and the emails and the lawyers. The first hour was just the sound of the tires. I had the stereo volume set to 12, low enough to talk over, high enough to fill the gaps. I was playing a playlist I curated for the drive. Bon Iver, The National, Fleet Foxes. Melancholy but safe. Sad dad music, Marcus used to call it. You bring the fancy mic? Marcus asked, staring out the window at the passing blur of rain-slicked Jersey barriers. Yeah, I said. The Sennheiser MKH416. And the Zoom F6 recorder. I want to capture some ambient rain textures for a project I am working on. A horror game, actually. Marcus laughed. A dry, barking sound. Horror game, right? Because real life is not scary enough. It pays the rent, I said, defensive. I know. He rubbed his eyes. I'm tired, Eli. I feel like I have not slept since June. I looked over at him. In the green glow of the dashboard lights, his face looked hollow. He was wearing an old gray hoodie, a Carhartt zip-up that had seen better days, and jeans that were too loose around the waist. That's why we redoing this, I said, tapping the steering wheel. Fresh air. No signal. Just us and the trees. We get some steaks going tonight. I brought those ribeyes from the butcher on 45th Street. The dry-aged ones. The ones that cost more than my alimony payment. The very same. We drove in silence for another 40 miles. The scenery shifted from the industrial gray of Tacoma to the sprawling green darkness of the peninsula. We stopped in Aberdeen for gas at a Chevron. I remember standing at the pump, watching the numbers tick up. $45. $50. $45. $75. The air here tasted different already, salty, briny, mixed with the sulfur smell of the pulp mills. It was 48 degrees Fahrenheit. I zipped my North Face fleece up to my chin. I went inside to buy snacks. This is important. I need you to understand the banality of it. I bought 2 bags of Jack Link's teriyaki beef jerky, a tin of Altoids, wintergreen, and a bottle of Smart Water. I stood in line behind a trucker buying a pack of Marlboro Reds and a scratch-off ticket. The cashier had a name tag that said, Brenda. She looked bored. Everything was so normal, so incredibly safely boring. I got back in the car. Breakfast of champions, I said, tossing the jerky at Marcus. He tore the bag open. The smell of artificial smoke and soy sauce filled the cabin. Thanks. We turned onto Highway 101, the road narrowing, the trees getting taller. Sitka spruces and western hemlocks, draped in moss, looming over the asphalt like cathedral arches. The rain had stopped, but the world was dripping. You ever think about how many people go missing out here? Marcus asked suddenly. I frowned, turning down the music. What? In the national parks. I was reading this article last night. Thousands of people. They just step off the trail to take a piss or tie their shoe, and poof, gone. No bodies, no gear, just swallowed. That's mostly hype, I said, my rationalizer brain kicking in instantly. People get lost because they unprepared. They go out without maps, they get hypothermia, they fall into ravines. Physics and biology, Marcus. Not magic. Maybe, he said. He was chewing the jerky slowly, staring into the dense green wall blurring past us. Or maybe the woods just get hungry. I laughed it off. Well, I have a GPS beacon, a satellite phone, and a first aid kit that could perform minor surgery. If the woods are hungry, they going to get indigestion. I wish I had not said that. I wish I had not been so arrogant. We arrived at the trailhead around 10:30 a.m. The parking lot was mostly empty, just a muddy Subaru Forester and a park ranger truck. The sky was a flat, bruised purple gray. We geared up. I checked my pack weight, 35 pounds exactly. My Osprey Atmos AG65 fits me like a glove, but 35 pounds is still 35 pounds. I watched Marcus struggle with his straps. He had an older pack, a Kelty from the 90s external frame. You good? I asked. Yeah, just stiff. We locked the car. I checked the handle 3 times. Click, click, click. A nervous tick I've had since childhood. We stepped onto the trail. The mud was thick, sucking at our boots. Squelch, pop, squelch, pop. We walked for 4 hours. The hike itself was beautiful in a prehistoric way. The Hoh Rainforest is one of the quietest places in the continental United States, but it's a living quiet. It's usually filled with the sound of water, drips, trickles, rushing streams. The moss absorbs sound, killing reverberation. It's a dead room, acoustically speaking. But about 3 miles in, the atmosphere shifted. It was not sudden. It was a gradient, like a dimmer switch being slowly lowered. I noticed it first through my ears, obviously. We had stopped for water. I pulled out my Nalgene. I was sweating. The humidity was 100%, and despite the 50-degree temperature, the air felt thick, heavy, like breathing through a wet wool blanket. Listen, I said. Marcus looked at me, wiping sweat from his forehead. What? I do not hear anything. Exactly. I pointed my microphone. I had it mounted on a pistol grip, ready to record towards the treeline. I adjusted the gain on my recorder. Usually, if you crank the gain on a high-end preamp like the Zoom F6, you hear the noise floor, the hiss of the electronics, the wind in the upper canopy, insects, distant birds. I put my headphones on, Silence. Not quiet. Null data. The meters on my recorder were not moving. Not even a flicker. It was as if the microphone had been unplugged. I checked the XLR cable. It was secure. I tapped the microphone chassis. Thump thump. The meters spiked. Okay, the gear was working, but the forest was not. Weird, I muttered, taking the headphones off. Must be a dead zone. The moss is probably damping everything. It smells funny, Marcus said. He was sniffing the air, frowning. Smells like wet cedar, I said. No, under that. Smells like copper or old pennies. I sniffed. He was right. There was a faint, metallic tang in the air. Tasted like blood in the back of the throat. Or ozone. Like the air right after a lightning strike, but stale. Atmospheric pressure change, I rationalized. Storm S probably coming in. Ozone drops down. I do not like it, Marcus whispered. He was not looking at me. He was looking into the dense wall of ferns to our left. I feel like we being watched. Paranoia is a side effect of dehydration, brother. Drink your water. We pushed on. We had to. We were only halfway to the designated campsite. By the time we reached the clearing near the riverbank where we planned to camp, the sun was already dipping behind the ridgeline. The light in the valley did not fade normally. It just turned gray, then a darker gray, draining the color out of the world. The bright green moss turned to ash. The brown mud turned to black tar. We set up camp in a hurry. I had a big Agnes Copper Spur HVUL2 tent. Ultralight, high-tech, expensive. As I snapped the DAC aluminum poles together, click, snap, click. The sound seemed violently loud in the stillness. Pass me the stakes, I said. Marcus handed them to me. His hand brushed mine. His skin was freezing. You cold? I asked. Freezing. I see not get warm. Put on your down jacket. The Patagonia one. He nodded and rummaged through his pack. I finished setting up the tent. The orange rainfly looked like a beacon against the gloom. Felt like a shield. A thin, nylon bubble of civilization. We cooked dinner on my jet boil. I boiled water and poured it into 2 pouches of Mountain House beef stroganoff. We sat on logs, eating the rehydrated mush with long titanium spoons. It's funny what you focus on when you re-scared. I focused on the texture of the beef cubes. They were spongy, salty, not quite meat. I focused on the steam rising from the pouch. It is too quiet, Eli, Marcus said again. He had not eaten much. It is just the valley, I said, my voice sounding too loud in my own head. The acoustics here are weird. River absorbs the sound. There are no birds, he said. We have not heard a bird in 2 hours. I paused, spoon halfway to my mouth. He was right. No jays, no crows, no thrushes. Just the slow, sluggish movement of the river water, which looked black and oily in the twilight. They re-roosting, I said. It is night time. Elias, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Look across the river. I looked. The river was about 40 feet wide here. On the other side, the bank rose steeply into a dense thicket of spruce and sword ferns. What? I asked, squinting. About 50 yards down. By that white birch tree. Do you see him? My heart stuttered. Him? I scanned the treeline. It was hard to see in the gathering dark. Shapes were merging, shadows stretching. Then I saw it. It was not a him in the traditional sense. It was a vertical shape, a silhouette standing perfectly still amongst the trees. It looked like a man wearing a parka, but the proportions were wrong. The shoulders were too narrow. The arms were too long. They hung down past where the knees should be. Is that another hiker? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He has not moved, Marcus whispered. I've been watching him for 10 minutes. He has not moved an inch. He is just staring at us. I stood up. My instinct was to wave, to call out. The rationalizer in me screamed that this was just a fellow camper looking for a spot, or maybe a ranger. Hey! I shouted. You okay over there? The sound of my voice fell dead the moment it left my lips. No echo. No reverberation. It was like shouting into a pillow. The figure did not flinch. It did not wave back. Then, slowly, glacially slowly, it began to tilt. Not walk. Tilt. The entire figure leaned to the left, at an angle that defied gravity, like a tree about to fall. But it did not fall. It just held that 45-degree angle, rigid, stiff. "Oh God!" Marcus whimpered. He scrambled backward, knocking over his half-eaten stroganoff. "Eli, look at its face." I fumbled for my headlamp, a black diamond spot 350. I clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the mist that was starting to rise from the river. I swept the light across the riverbank. The birch tree was there. The ferns were there. The figure was gone. "It was just a stump," I said immediately. I could feel the adrenaline shaking my hands. It was a dead snag. "Light tricks. Shadows. It had eyes, Elias," Marcus said, his voice trembling so hard his teeth chattered. "It did not have a face, but it had eyes." "Stop it," I snapped. I was angry now. Angry because I was terrified. We are tired. We are stressed. Our brains are finding patterns where there are not any. Desperitolia. Look it up. I aggressively started cleaning up the camp. I shoved the trash into the bear canister. I scrubbed the spoons. I made noise. I needed noise. "Let us just go to sleep," I said. "Things will look normal in the morning." We crawled into the tent. The smell of the nylon enclosed us. I zipped the door shut. Zip. That sound usually meant safety. Tonight it sounded like a body bag closing. I lay in my sleeping bag, a Marmot Trestles 15, staring up at the dark mesh. I checked my watch. 8:14 p.m. It was going to be a long night. I closed my eyes and tried to listen to the river. But all I could hear was Marcus's breathing. Shallow. Rapid. And then, about 20 minutes later, I heard something else. Came from outside. From the direction of the river. Splash. A heavy, wet step. Then silence. Then another. Splash. Something was crossing the river. And whatever it was heavy. I held my breath. I reached out and squeezed Marcus's arm. He was rigid, frozen solid. He heard it too. Schlop. 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 The sound of wet boots or wet feet. Pulling out of thick mud. It was coming up the bank. On our side. I lay there, my hand gripping the handle of the hunting knife I kept in the mesh pocket of the tent. It was a Gerber strong arm. 4 inches of steel. Felt like a toy. The footsteps stopped. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3, 10, 30. Silence. Then, a sound that made my blood turn to ice water. It was the sound of a zipper. Not our zipper. The sound of a zipper being slowly, methodically pulled down. But it sounded wet, like tearing meat. And then, a voice. It was not a whisper. It was a recording. It sounded exactly like me. "Hey, you okay over there?" My voice. My exact inflection from an hour ago. But it was distorted, bit crushed, as if played back through a low-quality speaker buried deep inside a chest cavity. "Hey, you okay over there?" It repeated. Marcus let out a high-pitched whimper. "Shoo!" I hissed, clamping my hand over his mouth. My hand tasted of hand sanitizer and dirt. The thing was right outside the tent. I could smell it now. It did not smell like ozone anymore. It smelled like that tent nylon, but burnt, melted plastic and old, stagnant water. "You okay over there?" The voice mimicked again. Then a finger, or something like a finger, traced a line down the outside of our tent fly. Zip. The fabric depressed where the finger touched it. I watched the indentation slide down the slope of the tent, inches from my face. I watched the fabric distort. It was not just a touch. It was a test of tensile strength. The indentation was deep, stretching the silicon-treated ripstop nylon of the Big Agnes rainfly to its absolute limit. I could see the outline of something that looked like a fingertip, but it was too long, too rigid. It looked like a bone pushed through a layer of wet chamois. Scritch. The nail, if that's what it was, dragged transversely across the weave. It was the sound of a needle on a record, magnified by the small acoustic chamber of the tent. Marcus was vibrating. That's the only word for it. I was pressed against him, shoulder to shoulder, and his entire body was humming with a frequency of pure terror. I could smell him, the sour, metallic stink of cortisol and old sweat. I gripped the handle of the Gerber's strong arm so hard my knuckles turned white. My rational mind was still trying to file a police report. Person outside. Harassment. Possible weapon. Location. 47. 86 degrees north. 123. 93 degrees west. Please, Marcus whispered. It was barely a breath. Please go away. The finger stopped moving. The silence that followed was heavy, pressurized. It felt like the air inside the tent had been sucked out. Then the voice came again. Please go away. It mimicked Marcus perfectly. The tremble, the pitch, the exact cadence of his fear. But there was a digital artifact in it. A subtle flanging effect, like two audio tracks played milliseconds apart. It was a sample. A high-fidelity recording played back through wet meat. Then it laughed. It was not a human laugh. It was a series of glottal clicks, rapid fire, like a dolphin chittering or a Geiger counter in a radiation zone. Click, 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 click. Who are you? I demanded. My voice was louder than I intended, cracking on the second word. I have a satellite phone. I've already called the Rangers. A lie. The Garmin InReach Mini was clipped to my pack in the vestibule. Outside the inner tent, separated from me by a thin layer of mesh and the thing that was waiting there. The entity did not respond to the threat. Instead, the pressure on the tent changed. The finger lifted. For a second, I thought it was leaving. I felt a surge of dopamine, the chemical precursor to relief. Then the whole side of the tent bowed inward. It was not pushing with a finger anymore. It was leaning, the entire weight of a body pressed against the fly, molding itself to the shape of our shelter. I could see the curvature of a spine, the ridge of a shoulder blade, but it was pressed hard, flattening the vestibule space. It was cuddling us. It was wrapping itself around the tent like a lover or a constrictor snake. I recoiled, scrambling to the far side of the tent, dragging Marcus with me. We were huddled against the opposite wall, our backs to the cold, damp nylon. Do not touch it, I hissed. Do not touch the sides. We sat there for what felt like an eternity. My Suntocore watch has a glow in the dark face. I watched the second hand tick. Tick, tick, tick. 8:42 p.m. The thing outside was heavy. The aluminum poles of the tent groaned under the stress. I was calculating the load limit of DAC featherlight poles. They redesigned for wind, for snow load, not for 100 and something pounds of dead weight leaning against the structure. Breathing. I heard it now. It was right against the fabric, inches from where my head had been moments ago. It did not sound like lungs. It sounded like a bellows. A wet, rhythmic wheezing. Ch-ch-ch-ch click. Ch-ch-ch-ch click. Every exhalation ended with that wet popping sound, like bubbles bursting in thick mud. Eli? Marcus whispered, tears streaming down his face. It's burning. What? The smell. Inside now. He was right. The scent of burnt plastic and ozone had permeated the mesh. It was suffocating. Tasted like an electrical fire. My eyes started to water. I realized then that the heat radiating from the thing was unnatural. It was not body heat. It was fever heat. Hot enough to radiate through the rainfly and the mesh body. The air in the tent was getting warmer, muggier. We have to wait it out, I whispered. CA not stay here forever. That's an animal. A bear. A sick bear. Bears do not talk, Elias. Marcus sobbed quietly. Parrots talk. Ravens talk. Mimicry exists in nature. It's a biological defense mechanism. I was rambling, my brain firing off Wikipedia articles to build a wall against the madness. Lyrebirds in Australia can mimic chainsaws and camera shutters. This is just an apex predator with advanced vocal cords. It wants us to open the door. We are not opening the door. We sat in that stalemate for 6 hours. I need you to understand the physicality of fear over that duration. In movies, fear is dynamic. You run, you hide, you fight. Real fear, survival fear, is static. It is a cramp. My legs seized up around 10 o'clock p.m. The lactic acid buildup from the hike, combined with the rigid tension of holding a defensive posture, turned my quads into stone. I could not stretch them because there was no room, and I was terrified that if I brushed against the tent wall, the thing would react. At 11:30 p.m., the condensation inside the tent started to drip. The heat from our bodies and the heat from the thing outside clashed with the dropping ambient temperature. Cold water droplets fell from the ceiling, hitting my forehead. Plip, plip. I wanted to scream. I wanted to unzip the door and stab the darkness just to end the waiting. But I did not. I sat there, gripping the knife, listening to the wet wheezing. At 2:15 a.m., the weight shifted. The poles creaked, snapping back into place as the pressure released. Schlop, schlop. The footsteps. They were moving away. I did not breathe. I tracked the sound. It was not going back across the river. It was circling. It walked around the perimeter of our campsite. I could hear it brushing against the salal bushes. I heard it knock over the bare canister we had wedged between two rocks. Thud clatter. It sniffed the canister. Sniff, sniff, sniff. Then a low, frustrated growl. It sounded like a heavy stone being dragged over concrete. Then silence. Real silence? Or the waiting silence? Is it gone? Marcus asked. Do not move, I said. We did not sleep. We could not. We sat in the dark, shivering as the temperature plummeted back down to the 40s. My bladder was screaming, a sharp, distended pain in my lower abdomen. I eventually had to urinate into an empty Gatorade bottle, trying to be silent, the sound of the stream seeming deafening in the quiet. I passed the bottle to Marcus. He did the same. We were animals in a cage, degrading ourselves to survive. The sun did not rise in the Hoh rainforest. The darkness just slowly dissolved into a bruised, milky gray. At 6 o'clock a.m., the birds started. A single varied thrush. That eerie, metallic whistle. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Birds. Marcus croaked. The birds are back. I waited another 30 minutes, just to be sure. My hand was cramped into a claw around the knife handle. I had to pry my fingers open with my other hand to get feeling back. I'm going to check, I said. No, Eli. We have to leave. We have to pack up and go. Now. I crawled to the vestibule. I reached for the zipper of the rainfly. My hand was shaking so bad I missed the pull tab twice. I grabbed it. I unzipped it in one fast motion. Zip. I burst out, knife raised, ready to stab anything that moved. Nothing. Just the forest. The giant hemlocks stood silent, draped in moss. The river churned innocently, gray water over gray rocks. The mist was hanging low, weaving through the tree trunks. I scrambled out, standing up, spinning in a circle. Clear! I yelled, my voice cracking. It's clear. Marcus crawled out. He looked 10 years older. His eyes were sunken, rimmed with dark purple bruises of exhaustion. He vomited immediately, yellow bile splashing onto the fern-covered ground. Get up, I said, grabbing his shoulder. We are leaving. Do not fold the tent. Just stuff it. Everything else, leave it if you have to. I went to pull the stakes of the rainfly. That S when I saw it. On the side of the tent where the thing had been leaning, the safe side, the side facing the woods, the orange nylon was changed. It was not torn. It was textured. A patch of the fabric, roughly the size of a human torso, was rigid. I touched it. It was hard, brittle, like plastic that had been exposed to a blowtorch and then flash frozen. But it was the pattern that stopped my heart. Pressed into the melted nylon, captured in perfect, high-resolution detail, was the texture of a weave. But not fabric. It was the texture of skin. But skin that had been magnified. Pores the size of dimes. Ridges like fingerprints but spanning the entire torso area. And in the center of the impression, right where a face would have been pressed against the mesh, There was a perfect, concave impression of a mouth. But there were no lips, just teeth. Hundreds of tiny, needle-like indentations. Rows of them, like a lamprey. "Do not look at it," I said, shoving the tent into my pack, breaking the poles in my haste. "Marcus, get in the car. We re-hiking out. Double time. We left the stove. We left the bear canister. We left the expensive ribeye steaks. We practically ran back down the trail. The hike in had taken 4 hours. The hike out took 2.5. I did not record any audio. I did not look at the scenery. I kept my head on a swivel, my hand on the knife clipped to my belt. Every root looked like a snake. Every moss-covered stump looked like a crouching figure. Marcus did not speak the entire way. He just walked, his breathing hitching every few minutes like a child who has been crying for hours. When we saw the trailhead parking lot, I almost wept. The sight of my 4Runner, that blocky, silver piece of Japanese engineering, was the most holy thing I had ever seen. I fumbled with the keys, dropping them in the mud. I snatched them up, unlocked the doors, and we threw our packs in the back. We got in. I locked the doors. I started the engine. The dashboard lit up. The AC kicked on. The radio started playing. It was still on the same playlist. The National was singing about sorrow. I turned it off. I reversed out of the spot, tires spinning in the gravel, and tore out onto the main road. I did not look in the rearview mirror until we were past the park entrance booth. When I finally did, I saw nothing but the road stretching out behind us. Empty. But the smell. It was in the car. I sniffed the air, panic rising in my throat. Burnt plastic. Ozone. "Marcus," I said, "check your boots." He lifted his foot. On the sole of his hiking boot, stuck in the Vibram tread, was a clump of something. It looked like gray slime. I pulled over on the shoulder of Highway 101, cars rushing past us at 60 miles per hour. I got out, grabbed a stick from the roadside, and scraped the stuff off his boot. It was thick, viscous. I brought the stick closer to my face to inspect it. It was not slime. It was a cluster of gray, fibrous threads, like mold, but they were moving, writhing, microscopic tendrils reaching out for a heat source. I threw the stick into the ditch and got back in the car. "What was it?" Marcus asked. "Gum." I lied. "Just gum." We drove back to Seattle in silence. I dropped Marcus off at his empty house. He did not say goodbye. He just nodded, grabbed his pack, and walked to his front door. He checked the lock 3 times before entering. I went home to my apartment in Capitol Hill. I took the tent, the expensive $500 Big Agnes tent, and I put it in the dumpster behind my building. I did not want to sell it. I did not want anyone else to have it. That night I sat in my studio, my soundproof, acoustically treated sanctuary. I pulled the SD card from my Zoom F6 recorder. I knew I should not. I knew I should just format the card and burn it. But I am a sound designer. I need to know. I loaded the file into Pro Tools. WAV file. 32-bit float. 96K hertz. I scrolled to the timestamp. 8:14 p.m. I saw the waveform. Flatline. Silence. Then the spikes. The footsteps. The voice. I put my headphones on. I isolated the moment the entity spoke. "Hey, you okay over there?" I applied a spectral analyzer to the clip. This tool shows you the visual representation of sound frequencies. A human voice has a very specific signature, harmonics, fundamental frequencies. The analyzer drew the picture. It was not a voice. The spectral display showed a geometric pattern. Perfect, vertical lines. It was synthetic. It was a carrier wave masquerading as audio. But under the carrier wave, in the sub-bass frequencies below 20 Hz, where the human ear ca not hear but the body can feel, there was something else. I boosted the gain by 60 decibels. I pitched it up 3 octaves so it would be audible. I listened. It was a voice. But it was not mine. And it was not the entity mimicking me. It was a chorus. Hundreds of voices. Screaming. Distant, layered, compressed into a single, low-frequency hum. And in the middle of that choir of screaming, I heard one voice clearly. It was a woman's voice. She sounded bored. "Customer assistance," she said. "Please hold." I ripped the headphones off and threw them across the room. I formatted the card. I drilled a hole through it with my power drill. I have not been back to the woods. Marcus moved to Arizona 3 months later. He said the dampness in Seattle was making his bones hurt. We do not talk much. When we do, we talk about sports or politics. We never talk about the trip. But sometimes, late at night, when the city traffic dies down and the silence creeps into my apartment, I hear it, not with my ears, but with my teeth. A low, rhythmic vibration. Ch-ch-ch-ch click. Ch-ch-ch-ch click. And I know, with absolute statistical certainty, that somewhere in the vast, green silence of the Olympic Peninsula, something is still listening, waiting for the next signal, waiting to press its face against the thin, fragile barrier of our reality, and whisper our own voices back to us.